Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone is the first film in the Harry Potter series, and the filmmakers had a massive task of turning J.K. Rowling's first book into a feature-length film, and had the job of setting up the wizarding world for the next 10 years and pleasing both J.K. Rowling herself and the millions of fans around the world. They also had so much pressure to deliver this movie, and they did such a good job of turning this book into a feature-length film. The film was directed by Chris Columbus, and he has directed films such as Mrs. Doubtfire, Home Alone, and so much more. And he was the right person to direct this film because he has a lot of experience with working with kids and understood the source material the most. They also had the big task of turning this book into a movie, and they had to know what to cut out and leave in. And for the most part, they did a very good job because the book really isn't that big, and I think it's a very good adaptation. They also had the task of casting 10-year-old actors for the lead roles, which is a massive risk for the studio because they are so young and they're just beginning to act. And working with children on a movie set can be very hard because they have to be educated, have lunch breaks and other breaks throughout filming hours. That means they got very little time filming with the kids each day, and it meant the filming took a lot longer than most movies. Sometimes in Hollywood they cast older actors to play the roles. For example, in the first Percy Jackson book, the kids are supposed to be 12 years old, however in the film they are 17. Although in The Philosopher's Stone, the kids smash their performance in the movie. I mean, some of the acting isn't amazing, but it does improve in later films. It's interesting when you look at behind the scenes of the movie and you see that these kids were so young and they were just kids. And for the most part, they had no idea how big this movie was going to be and the whole Harry Potter franchise and how famous they were going to become. I should also mention how great the grown-up actors were cast and how it felt that you were watching these characters that you've been reading about being portrayed by wonderful, talented actors. So now let's talk about the story. I see this film as setting up the Harry Potter world, showing us the likes of Hogwarts, Diagon Alley, the Forbidden Forest, and in later films they do show us at other magical places, but this film just seems like it's setting up all of this and showing us things like the classes, Quidditch, and setting up the characters so they can grow and develop throughout the series, especially setting up the friendship between Harry, Ron, and Hermione. However, because they are setting up all of these things, the whole storyline with the Philosopher's Stone gets kind of sidelined and it feels a bit more like a subplot than a main point in the story. Also, after watching through this movie again, I remembered that this film is forced more towards younger audiences. Maybe it's because of the young kids or the bright magical world, and it can be very heartfelt and even funny at times. And it just doesn't feel like some of the other Harry Potter films that get darker and more mature. But this film just feels more lighthearted, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing, because it's a very good place to start for a storytelling perspective. And the first few books are aimed more towards kids, but as the movies go on, it attracted a more older audience. Like the films are getting more mature as we get older. I really like in this movie how they focused a lot on the schooling and the classes. Now, as the films go on, and Goblet of Fire onwards, we don't really get to see much of the classes. Usually there's only about one in each film, but in the Philosopher's Stone, we get to see several, and it's really good to see all the wizarding classes and the schooling. I should also quickly mention that the sets in this movie are very well done. Stuart Craig, who created all the sets that we see on screen and making J.K. Rowling's world come to life from book to screen, is very good and it looks so good on screen and it stays up for the rest of the series. I really like the sequences in the film where there's some action, like the Quidditch, and when they have to go down to the dungeons, or when they go to the toilet to rescue Hermione from the troll. I really like these scenes, and it shows that the characters are really developing, and that Harry is a good wizard. Although when you think about it and watch the movie carefully, Harry doesn't actually cast one spell correctly in this movie. So, just proves without Hermione, Harry, Ron probably would have died in the first one. Even when I saw this film for the first time when I was 9 years old, I absolutely loved it, and I was so impressed that they kept to the book, and that's why I became a Harry Potter fan, not just because of the books, but the movies. And they also could have mucked this up, because when you're turning a book into a movie, you have to know what to cut and leave in, and sometimes they get this wrong, and fans can become unhappy with the first movie and then they won't go see the second, and the Harry Potter franchise would not have been made. Luckily, they did do a good job, but there are still things in this movie that aren't amazing and don't look good now, like the CGI. Now, I know this wouldn't have been a problem back in the 2000s, but this CGI just looks out of date and a bit cringy 20 years later. Like the Quidditch, or the magical creatures, and the fake looking CGI humans, like when Neville was on the broomstick and crashing into the castle. Some of these things just don't age well than others. Another thing that I don't really like is when Ron says he's going to sacrifice himself. I do like this whole sequence when they're trying to get through the obstacles to try and receive the Philosopher's Stone, but when Ron says he's going to sacrifice himself so Harry can go on, it just seems cringy and childish. But they play it out as like he's going to die when he's just falling off a big chess piece. I don't know, it just seems a little out of place. Although overall, this film does a great job of setting up the Wizarding World and setting a tone for the story in this epic first adventure of Harry Potter. Thank you so much for watching. I will review other Harry Potter films in the coming future, but please comment down below what you would like me to review next. Make sure to subscribe and like this video, and I'll see you next Friday.